Hello, Screen Junkies. I am Roth Cornett, and I am so excited to be joined today by Colin Trevorrow. Hello.
Hello.
You are the man behind Safety Not Guaranteed, Jurassic World, upcoming in theaters this week, The Book of Henry, and of course, Star Wars Episode 9, which you just warned me I should only ask who Snoke is. Is that right? Those are the questions you want.
So you can see my ability to dodge.
It's such a weird thing to want to know, too, frankly, but we all seem to have theories about it. I say it's Luke. We'll move on from there. Doing Safety Not Guaranteed, which is essentially you were challenged with doing a sci-fi movie with a relatively low budget. What did you learn from that experience about when not to spend money once you got into a situation where you almost had endless, to us it seems like, endless resources?
I think I learned not to spend money unless your story requires it.
Yeah.
I feel like that movie, even though it was on a low budget, it cast a bit of a mumblecore spell on people, so that you watched it and you were so convinced that you were in one of those movies where the sound is barely audible and it looks like it's shot on an iPhone and there's no way that magic could possibly happen in this world. And then when it does, it's a genuine surprise.
Yeah. Who started mumblecore as a thing?
That, Mark Duplass and his brother Jay Duplass.
But who coined the term?
I think it was coined for them by someone who was writing a review.
As a storyteller, you're talking about Book of Henry is a film that is both about children and adults, and the reversal of that relationship, which is tricky. So do you feel like that did prep you going into this sort of just tonally to do what you're talking about, speak to both?
Well, just as a storyteller and a filmmaker, I am so interested in trying to balance tones that we normally wouldn't put together. Just like all my inspiration are chefs. And I look at what chefs are forced to do based on just the constant changing needs from the people they're serving, and they have to try new things, and they have to try some things that might not taste good and the things that will. And the thing I love the most about them is that when they have a success, they'll shut the restaurant down and they'll open something else and try and rethink. Well, what does food mean to me? And that's kind of what I did. So Jurassic World was a huge success, so I shut down the restaurant, and this is a pop-up movie, and I genuinely think that this is something that for people who love movies, for people who love storytelling, I think that I know we've screened the movie for people, and I know what the reactions are, and it can be a polarizing movie because of the risks that it takes. And I
hard to talk about that.
It is hard to talk about that, but I'm very proud of it, and it does represent the kind of experimenting with storytelling that I would be doing if I were just left to making my own movies. I'm not going to experiment like this on the larger franchises. Not quite like this.
Yeah.
Although Jurassic World 2, we made some really interesting choices, and Jay and I and Derek and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing for movie lovers if they are watching what's happening now in terms of what you're talking about, the trajectory of these careers, to see all of these films, right? It's important if you're interested in Jurassic World and Star Wars Episode 9 to then see Book of Henry, because it does inform the moviegoer about what that process is like and the different sort of things that a director can do. But one of the things that I thought was maybe really challenging for you and the actors was that reversal of the relationship, because that's technically a very unhealthy thing, and yet we really have to feel a lot of empathy for both of them.
I think for parents, they'll see themselves in that idea in a way that maybe people who haven't had kids yet, it might feel a little shocking that you would rely on your child to guide you in any way. Parents feel that way every day. We don't entirely know what we're doing, and we make mistakes all the time. And our children oftentimes they sound so smart to us, and they said they're so rational and logical, and it feels like that story where they're trying to get the truck through the tunnel, and the kid comes in and says, "Well, let the air out of the tires."
Yeah.
That happens in parenting all the time, where you're like, "Yeah, he's right. Just let the air out of the tires." So you start to rely on them a little bit, and I think it can be a dangerous thing, as you say, because it is our job to be the adults, and ultimately this movie is about violence being the mindset of a child,
right?
And realizing they look to us, we have to be the lighthouse, we have to guide them toward the shore, and so we need to step it up and be a parent. And I'm a parent of two, an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I'm proud of my parenting, but I won't say that it's perfect, and I won't say that it didn't take me some time to actually turn into a parent. It doesn't happen the minute that the kid is born.
Yeah.
It takes a little time.
Or never. I don't know. For
Sometimes
some
never.
people.
Sometimes never. But don't be too hard on yourself. It's hard.
There's also, it's a violence that you understand, which is, if you're talking about that as a metaphor for our world in a way, you can sort of understand why the characters get to the point that they would want to engage in violent action.
In this case, it's a character who is losing grip on her reality because of a horrible experience that she's had, and she's spiraling and almost spiraling into that childlike sense of vengeance. When you're a kid, like, what are you going to do? We're going to kill him. We're going to get a gun and we're going to kill him. And like, no, that's not what we do. But I think in our world today, there's a lot of people who they'll just go there. And I think it's just important to remember that, you know, adults have been alive for a long time. There's a wisdom that comes with that. Maybe we should listen and not resort to these, you know, reactionary kind of choices.
It's also for the greater good, though, in her mind. And in, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
There's the idea of a greater good that, again, we won't talk about.
Well, I mean, she feels she's stopping the ultimate evil.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that's something that as a parent, when you think of all the fears you have of like, what's going to happen to my kid? Are they going to get sick? Is someone going to hurt them? Is someone going to take them? These are such horrifying ideas that the fury that can rise up in you at just the thought of it is pretty deep. And I, you know, for me, you know, each of these things you relate to each film you do. You know, Safety Not Guaranteed for me was, I was Kenneth. Like I was able to connect to somebody who was looking back at that earlier time in life and maybe needed to keep those Star Wars figures in the box, and you know, that feeling. And in Jurassic World, I was Claire. Like I was somebody who had been given this massive responsibility, relied on technology, had failed, and then had to rely on her instincts in order to succeed. That was me on that movie as we were making it, and this is me as a parent. So without being, you know, selfish or navel gazing of like they're all about me, you do have to find something that you can hold on to. And this movie, I definitely did.
You're playing with those figures now. It's also the last thing I'm curious about, because there's this idea of genius. And it's tough, right? Because I remember, because I went to a school that had little kid geniuses in it, and they are precocious and they are smarter than makes you comfortable, but they're still kids. As a director, how are you helping him find that balance?
He is very good.
He's a good actor.
He's very good, and he found that. I mean, even in the writing, there was a way that you could take it to this. He would be obnoxious. Just this precocious kid that you don't care what happens to him. Jaden came in and he just dialed into the emotional intelligence of that kid and the empathy that you may take a while to develop. And it was, even when we first started watching the dailies, we were wondering, like, is this going to connect? Is this right? And then he pretty much just took it and ran with it. And I stepped back, because you have this feeling of sometimes as a director, they're pitching a perfect game. Don't go talk to him.
Yeah.
Let him do what he's doing. And Naomi is the same way. Maddie Ziegler, very similar. Her first movie as an actor. Sometimes when people are, she'd never been in front of the camera in that way. She'd been dancing. And so to be able to find the kinds of emotions that we find in this movie, it was really challenging for all of them, but they helped each other. And it's amazing the instincts that children have. And sometimes you just got to let them have them.
So coming from the indie world, as you so obviously did, that's the dream, right? Is it the dream to make that jump, or is that a thing where I have to imagine just even making a jump in your career from one promotion to the next? Sometimes I think there's so much fear that comes with that.
Yeah.
And it's almost harder once you're in success to continue on. Can you talk about those challenges? Does that make sense?
It does. I don't think it's everybody's dream. We all have our own dreams. And, you know, my dream was to be able to go back and make a movie like the one I just made.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I know a lot of filmmakers who wouldn't really have an interest in doing something like that. It's a giant corporate product, and the needs to, and not in any kind of negative way, but the needs to serve not just the studio for the film itself, but the licensing and the marketing, all of these octopus tentacles that stretch out from these films that are created, and then also try to make something that feels not just exciting, but honest and real. It's a certain kind of filmmaking, and making Safety Not Guaranteed or the Book of Henry, you're not having to think about all those other components, and it's liberating, and it's that kind of creative, just that real good, meaty, juicy, creative freedom that we all want when we go to film school. So I don't make an assumption that everybody would want to take that path. I didn't necessarily want to take that path. I don't know if I agree with the circumstances of my own hiring in that scenario. I'm not sure if it's the best thing.
Wait, that's fascinating.
Well,
why?
I don't know if it's the best thing for us to get into the habit of taking filmmakers who come out of Sundance with one film and thrusting them into a situation where, you know, they're handling a much larger beast. It's not just about the budget; it's all the things I mentioned, without allowing them to grow as artists. I feel like if you had given Bond to Tarantino after Reservoir Dogs, we wouldn't have Pulp Fiction.
I am imagining a very interesting Bond, however.
I would watch that movie. Don't get me wrong.
That's a really fascinating perspective, right? So do you almost wish, okay, two questions. The $30 million film, it doesn't really exist in the way that it did at one point. That's on TV, right? That's now limited series where you can do that kind of deep character work storytelling at around that budget.
Yeah.
So what do you do if you're you, for example? Do you wish you would have had that transition more than jump into Jurassic World?
I mean, I don't know if I wish, but I went and did this for that reason. That's why I made this movie. And this is a $10 million movie, so it's a lot more than $750,000. It is a big leap as far as what we had to work with, really the level of talent that you can surround yourself with. Not that the people who did Safe Not Guaranteed are not extraordinarily talented, but everybody's working with a set of resources. I think, you know, the budget to make that time machine was in the hundreds.
Yeah.
And so to have the ability to work on your storytelling, to work on your ability to connect with people and create characters that people can completely, you know, see themselves in and get behind, all of that stuff. It takes learning, it takes time. And I think that we make this assumption that just because somebody knows how to place the camera and direct a crew, that's all of directing. Directing is finding your voice. Directing is learning how to communicate through that medium. And so, yeah, like I do wish that I had been able to make Book of Henry between Safety and Jurassic, and so I went and did it. And now you can just take the Blu-rays and put them in the proper order, and you'll have my intended, trajectory. I definitely love being able to make the movies that I'm making. I love being able to do Jurassic World. Jurassic World 2, which was a great collaboration with Jay Bayona, has been the best experience of my life so far. And of course, you know, my next job is I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I know I'll be better off for having done this movie.
So Jay Bayona is coming from also a series of smaller films, but the most recent was Monster Calls.
Monster Calls. You know, he's interesting in that I think we think those movies are small because they were released as independent films in America, but you know, The Impossible and Monster Calls are the top two highest grossing movies in Spain of all time, like above Avatar. And they actually, you know, $30 million in Europe is a lot. It goes a lot further than it does here. Just, you know, unions and all these other costs that we lay on movies. And he shot for 100 days, which is longer than, you know, we shot Jurassic, I think it was 80. And his schedule on Jurassic World 2 was shorter than his last two movies. So I think a filmmaker usually, you know, the general feeling of budget is how much time you have. And so I think he's actually a much more of a big budget filmmaker than we would think from our perspective.
Yeah, that is an interesting perspective, right? Because we don't think of it that way. And I feel like we're constantly now seeing fresh talent tapped that are just out of Sundance and doing these huge movies. I remember years ago, Shane Carruth, who won Sundance in 2004 for Primer. I wonder if you guys ever talked about doing he did that for $7,000.
That was amazing.
Is that insane?
I don't understand how that's possible.
And he came to my film school at the time, and in a director's class, we would have directors come in and talk to us. And he said every meeting he took, people even then were saying, do you have an IP you want to do? Is there a comic book character that you want to do? And he just didn't even know how to deal with it. So he sort of went away for a very long time. What is the middle ground? What do you advise people coming out of Sundance with those kinds of pressures and offers?
Everybody is their own person. It's impossible to know.
You don't have the answer for us all.
Anyone wants. I don't have to answer for everyone. You know, I think that some people come out of the gate rearing to go and wanting that kind of responsibility. They want to make those kind of movies. Others are offered something like that, and they realize that if I do this and I do it well, I can make the kind of movies I want to make for a long time. And I know that to be true, having made a similar choice. And some filmmakers just don't want to make those kinds of movies and will continue making. Honestly, I think those tend to be the filmmakers that, you know, people who love movies like us follow the most intensely and most closely, because you're just like, what are they going to think of next? Like, this is a new voice. I want to follow this.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure P.T. Anderson could have done. I'm sure that he could have done a big movie, and yet we've been watching his movies intently for a long time.
Sure.
That's a choice.
And there's, I remember did an interview with David Cronenberg for Cosmopolis, and he said that Robert Pattinson was shocked by the amount of freedom, you're talking about this, that he had on set. He said that his experience with the Twilight films had been that the studio was telling him what colors to pick on the wall and everything, and Cronenberg says, I can't do it. I could never work that way. So for you, I'm curious, what are the interesting creative freedoms that you find in the various limitations, right? Like on these big budgets, you have many more voices, and
every situation is different.
Yeah.
The answer is always it's complicated, like with everything. And so I think, my situation on Jurassic World was completely different than what you just described, which borderline draconian in what you say, like if
So
you're
what
choosing
was
colors.
it?
I'm not going to say there were no adults there, but I was given, because I think of the amount of times I had to prove that I knew what I was doing and that I was prepared before production. By the time we got there, they let me make the film, and they loved the dailies they were seeing. And it's not that they're not going to step in if they have to; they always will. But we made that film work, and I think because I had Steven and Frank, there were people who were not just vouching for me, but like Frank Marshall would have stepped in and started taking much more control over that movie if I wasn't delivering. It's that feel. It's the Princess Bride. Like, I'm going to kill you in the morning.
Dread Pirate Roberts.
Yeah.
That's amazing. There's my headline. Frank Marshall is Dread Pirate Roberts.
We all are. Like,
yeah.
It's just the feeling you have every day. If when you get one of these films, you just have that sense that you're constantly operating under on a day-to-day basis. And if you mess up too bad because of the amount of money invested, because of the stakes, yeah, they'll start picking the colors of the wall.
Do you, when you watch something like, and I don't know how closely you watch this or not, something like Josh Trank and Fantastic Four, is there just a profound empathy that you feel for him? Because that was the situation that he had. He made a very small film in relative terms.
Chronicle, I thought that's a much bigger movie. That was a $15 million movie, and I think he pulled it off beautifully.
But compared to something like that, Fantastic Four with that kind of budget, and not only that, the existing IP to deal with, if you're not familiar with it.
It's hard. Yeah. It's all really hard, and that's why even the films that people think go perfectly smoothly, like the director's experience, as you know, like years down the line, you start to hear these stories. It can be a little different, and so I think somebody has to really want it, to really be willing to not just risk that kind of creative control being taken from you if you're not delivering, but being able to handle, as I said, all these other plates that you have to spin when doing something on that level. It's obviously exhausting. Making movies is exhausting. Making a little short film is exhausting. You're still there all day. I think just like the mental Olympics that you have to go through on one of these larger films is pretty unparalleled.
So when you're working with Jay Boona now, is this a new sort of model that's being invented in a way where it's a director to director experience as you come on as the producer to pass the mantle and create that cohesion? Is that sort of the relationship that you have?
The relationship, I wouldn't say it's invented, because Indiana Jones.
Sure. Yeah.
Was very similar, and I co-wrote the movie with Derek, and even after Derek was done working, I stayed on and was the on-set writer for the movie. I'd show up with my backpack every day and just like, what do you need, man? Like, how do we make this thing great? And I think just out of my own sense of wanting the movie to be better than the first movie, wanting it to be deeper and richer and to take it into new places, I still have something to prove to myself, and I feel like because I crafted it specifically for him, I was able to just completely commit to that as a filmmaker and just like throw the ego away, shed it all, and just work with this guy who I admire and make something great. It is a Spanish horror thriller with dinosaurs. It's dope. I love it. Is
that, when you say better, how do you mean? What do you mean specifically?
I think I would say richer and deeper and more character oriented. Jurassic World was designed to make you feel like a child for the 2 hours that you were watching it, and I'm so in tune with my own need to go back to childhood, a time when things were simple, and you could ride your bike down the street and your parents didn't know where you were, and you kind of felt like, I'm going to make a plan and I'm going to execute it, and like just that sense of safety. And I think that all of us, I won't speak for everyone, but that's a very common theme I've found in film and politics. We all want to go back to an earlier time. And so that's what that movie was about for adults. And then for kids, it was for them. I mean, it is for kids.
Yeah.
I don't mean like 6-year-olds, but
sure,
they deserve their own Jurassic movie too. And I say this to my kids all the time because my daughter loves Moana. It's the only thing there is in the world until she saw Wonder Woman. But it was Moana for the past. Now, I mean, she is Wonder Woman. I don't know if I tweeted a picture of her before and after Wonder Woman that I took, and it's her just kind of standing there like herself, and then she's got like a bow and a sword, and it just like stands differently. You see her like posture change. But my older son, who was like, Moana sucks. He's just giving her a horrible time. Yeah. And the thing we repeat in the house: don't hate something other people love. Why? Why do that? And we repeat it constantly. And he's learned just let her love Moana. I also have to debate him because Moana's amazing. Yeah. And I've watched it probably 15 to 20 times now, so I know that movie pretty well.
It's great. Yeah. I'm curious. I mean, I think that you can tell I would love to be a fly on the wall with you and Ryan. I love Ryan Johnson, and that's another one. He's done the 3, but then he took the looper to this. But because I'm curious about the process, exactly what we're talking about, where you have this world that has to be cohesive, but JJ and Ryan have very different voices, and you have a very different voice again. What is Kathleen Kennedy the one that makes sure you're like, stay on target?
Yes, but not just Kathy Kennedy. There's also Curie Hart, who's the head of story at Lucasfilm, and she has a story group. And part of their job is to make sure that not just these movies are cohesive, but everything, comics, books, anything that they're working on stays in canon. Pablo Hidalgo is another key player in that. And if you look at that room, it's the most diverse group of perspectives you could possibly put together. And it was done intentionally that way, because these movies have to connect and reach everyone from all around the world in a pretty deep way. And that's not going to happen if it's even just one filmmaker. And so I do rely on all of these people, and also my producer, Michelle Rejwan, who's just, we're together every day and constantly talking about this from every angle. I think there's really no other way to go about it. So, when you look at somebody like JJ or Ryan or we may be, we're a conduit for a lot of ideas and a lot of thoughts, and ultimately, yes, there are voices, but there are voices in conjunction with the best collection of minds you could ever hope to put together for something like this.
Do you feel like you are in a position to creatively brainstorm in those moments and really bring something new to Rey and to Luke that hasn't been there previously?
We're headed into the place where I'll start dodging questions. We're getting close.
Who is Snoke? So Rey is Snoke, is what I'm hearing from that.
What I'll tell you is really what I've said. Like I feel a lot of creative support.
Yeah.
And I welcome that. And all of these movies are going to be a little different than the movies made by the same filmmakers before. Yeah. Because they need to be. Star Wars is different.
And you've talked about it being films in general, it's important to be for children. And George Lucas came out and he said that very definitively. He said, this is for kids. Star Wars is for kids. Do you agree?
I don't. I think that I take the perspective of children into consideration among many others.
Sure.
And so I don't think they're exclusively for kids. I think that it's important that I understand the way that kids today look at the world, because they grew up during a very different time. And so I can't make an assumption that I know what it's like to be a kid in 2017. And so I want to talk to them. And there's, it's a dark world, it's a scary world right now. And they're very, a lot of kids, especially if either their parents are honest with them or just in the media they get fed every day, they're seeing stuff that is pretty hard for all of us to process. And so imagine you're 8 and then apply that to what you need from a Star Wars film, because they're intrinsically related to the world we live in at that moment. So one of many. Not the only.
When you think about this passing the mantle, you're now part of this ongoing, like you said, this is an amazing tradition that's happening from as director and producer. The people that originated these stories and these characters, George Lucas and Spielberg, how important is it for them to let go and or be involved?
Both. I have a relationship with Steven that has been very close, and George I've met with several times, and he's been fantastic. But
he's
it's a
not
little
involved.
different. Yeah, it's a little different.
He's just not involved anymore because he sold it.
But the Steven at first, because there were. Jurassic World was based on a set of ideas that he laid out that he was interested in exploring. And so from a writing standpoint, even though we wrote the screenplay, it was in service to what he was interested in doing. And after that movie did all right, he gave us the freedom to build a movie that we were interested in. And we made sure to hear, is there anything you do want to see? But, we really were able to take it in its own direction. So I think the feeling that Jurassic World and Jurassic Park have, a lot of mirror image moments of each other, that those paths are going to diverge with the second one.
Book of Henry is in theaters this week.
This Friday.
June 16th. Mm-hmm. Go watch Safety Guaranteed, Not Guaranteed. If you haven't seen it, watch the whole trajectory, because I think if you love movies, and you do if you're watching this, because we're talking about directing the whole time, that's a great thing to do, and inform yourself about the path that filmmakers can take. I know you've seen episode 8. This is my last try. Is it good? Just give me a wink.
I'll just say I may have seen it.
Just give me a wink.
I'll just say I may have seen it.
I'm saying I saw a wink. I didn't really. Thank you. I've had so much fun talking with you today. Click here for more awesome Screen Junkies news and click the logo to subscribe.